Be me, 20 years old, second-year economics major, sitting in Econ 301 Intermediate Microeconomics massive lecture hall with maybe 200 students. Professor droning on about labor market economics and wage determination, barely paying attention because I already know where this is going. He's going to gloss over the systematic discrimination that keeps women earning less than men. Same story every time. These older male professors just refuse to acknowledge institutional sexism. I've been waiting all semester for him to bring up wage gaps so I can finally say something, not the type to just sit back and let misinformation slide. Grew up in a household where we actually talked about these issues, where critical thinking mattered. My mother worked her entire life and made less than men in her field, watched her struggle with that reality. Spent my teenage years reading everything I could about economic inequality, women's issues, structural discrimination, not some shallow activist who just repeats slogans. I actually understand the economics behind gender inequality. Professor finally gets to the section on wage differentials. Here we go. He starts explaining human capital theory, education, experience, occupational choice, classic neoclassical economics framework that conveniently ignores discrimination. My blood is already starting to simmer, and he mentions the pay gap almost as an afterthought, like it's just some statistical quirk that needs explaining away. Says something about how raw wage gaps don't account for various factors. I can feel my jaw clenching, raise my hand immediately. Professor looks surprised, probably because I haven't said much in class before, not because I don't have opinions, just been waiting for the right moment. He calls on me. I start explaining how the gender pay gap is a documented reality. Women earn significantly less than men. Mention the 77 cents figure, how it's been consistent across studies. My voice is steady, confident, because I know I'm right about this. I've been reading about this issue since high school, written papers on it. Some of the other students are nodding along. Feel like I'm finally contributing something meaningful to this class. Professor does that condescending thing where he smiles and says, "That's an interesting point, but it's more complicated than that." Of course it's more complicated. Everything is always more complicated when it comes to acknowledging discrimination. I push back, explain that this isn't just about individual choices, it's about systemic barriers. Women are pushed into lower paying fields, face discrimination in hiring and promotion, deal with motherhood penalties. This is documented, this is real, this is happening. Professor nods but then moves on with his lecture. It feels like a dismissal. I'm sitting there frustrated because once again the institutional reality of sexism gets swept under the rug. Class continues. I'm barely listening now, just thinking about all the counter-arguments I should have made. Then some guy in the back raises his hand. Professor calls on him. I glance back. It's this guy I've seen around campus, always sits in the back with his laptop. He starts asking questions about the pay gap statistics. His tone is measured, calm, almost annoyingly polite. He's asking about methodology, about controls, about what variables are being considered. Something about the way he's asking makes my stomach tighten. This feels like it's directed at me, even though he's technically addressing the professor. Professor seems almost relieved, like finally someone is asking the right questions. The guy continues, says he's been looking at Department of Labor statistics. Starts citing specific studies, talking about how when you control for hours worked, occupation, experience, education, the gap shrinks significantly. I feel my face getting hot. This is the standard dismissive argument, the one that tries to explain away. Discrimination. Raise my hand again, don't even wait to be called on. Interrupt to say that those controls don't eliminate discrimination. They just describe the mechanisms through which discrimination operates. My voice comes out sharper than I intended. Some students turn to look at me. The guy in the back, he just calmly responds. Says, "That's an interesting theoretical point, but we need to look at the actual data." Pulls up something on his laptop, starts reading off statistics, talking about CONSAD research study, about how they found minimal unexplained wage gap when accounting for career choices and work patterns. I counter that women's career choices aren't made in a vacuum, they're shaped by societal expectations and discrimination. He acknowledges that, says it's a valid social question, but that's different from employer discrimination. The way he says it, so measured and reasonable, makes it sound like I'm being hysterical. I'm not being hysterical, I'm being passionate. About injustice. This back and forth continues for a few minutes. Professor is just letting it happen, probably thinks it's good classroom debate. Other students are watching like this is entertainment. I bring up the fact that women are penalized for negotiating, face hostile work environments, deal with sexual harassment. These are real barriers that affect earnings. The guy nods, says, those are serious issues that should be addressed. But then pivots back to the statistics, says we need to distinguish between different types of discrimination and different explanations for wage gaps. He's doing that thing where he sounds so reasonable that my arguments seem emotional in comparison. Starting to feel like I'm losing control of this debate. My heart is pounding, can feel sweat on my palms. He starts pulling up more data, reading from what he says is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, talking about how single childless women in urban areas actually out-earn their male counterparts in some demographics. Claims this suggests the gap isn't simple discrimination, but involves complex life cycle and family factors. I know there's something wrong with that argument, but I'm so flustered I can't articulate it clearly. Say something about how that's just cherry-picking data. He responds calmly that it's government data from the same sources used to demonstrate the pay gap. Says, if we accept BLS data for one claim, we should consider all of it. Other students are murmuring now. Some seem to be agreeing with him. Feel like the room is turning against me. Try to regain footing by bringing up the Lily Ledbetter case. Concrete example of pay discrimination. He doesn't miss a beat. Says individual cases of discrimination exist and are illegal, but that doesn't tell us about systematic wage gaps across the economy. Then he starts talking about occupational choices in more detail. Mentions how the highest paying college majors are dominated by men, lowest paying by women, petroleum, engineering versus social work, computer science versus education. Says the wage gap largely reflects these different occupational distributions. I jump in, say that's exactly the problem. Women are socialized away from high-paying fields. He agrees that's a social issue worth examining, but then says that if women freely choose different fields because of different interests or priorities, that's not the same as employers paying women less for the same work. The way he keeps agreeing with me on these small points while dismantling my main argument is infuriating. Feels manipulative, like a debate tactic. I'm getting more animated now, can feel my voice rising. Bring up the fact that even within the same fields, women earn less. Cite something. I remember reading about female doctors earning less than male doctors. He's ready for this too. Talks about how even within medicine you have to control for specialty, hours worked, years of experience. Mentions that more male doctors go into high-paying specialties like surgery and cardiology. More female doctors choose pediatrics and family medicine, which pay less. Says this isn't discrimination by hospitals, it's different career paths within the same field. I counter that women are discouraged from surgery, face sexism in those specialties. He says that's a different claim than saying women are paid less for the same work. Keeps making these distinctions that make my arguments sound imprecise. Professor is watching with this expression I can't quite read. Feels like he's enjoying watching me squirm. The guy continues. Now he's pulling up data about hours worked. Talking about how men on average work more hours than women, especially among salaried professionals. Says in many high-paying careers, there's a disproportionate premium for working long, inflexible hours. Mentions recent study about MBA graduates, how the gap emerges after children because of hours worked. I try to interrupt, say that's because women are forced to do unpaid care work. He lets me finish, then calmly says, that's a division of household labor issue, not employer discrimination. Says if we're concerned about that, the solution is different than claiming employers pay women less for the same work. I'm scrambling now, trying to remember all the arguments I've read. Bring up something about resume studies, how identical resumes with female names get fewer callbacks. He nods, says those studies are important for understanding hiring discrimination. But then says that's about hiring bias, not wage gaps among current employees. Keeps creating all these careful distinctions. Says discrimination exists in various forms, but we need to be precise about what we're claiming. My thoughts are getting jumbled. I'm mixing up different arguments. Mention something about the wage gap increasing with age. He's ready for that too. Talks about how that correlates with children, career interruptions. accumulated experience gaps, brings up data about childless women's wages tracking more closely with men's, suggests this indicates motherhood and career continuity are major factors, not discrimination against all women. I can feel my face burning now. Other students are completely silent, just watching this unfold. Feels like everyone is judging me. Try to regroup. Go back to the basic point that women earn less overall and that matters. He agrees it matters, says economic inequality is worth studying, but then says, if we misdiagnose the cause, we'll implement wrong solutions. Says if the gap is mostly about occupational choice and hours worked, then policies should address those factors, not enforce equal pay laws which already exist and don't solve the underlying issues. Mentions that countries with strongest equal pay enforcement still have significant wage gaps. I don't know enough about international comparisons to counter this effectively, feeling completely out of my depth now. He starts talking about something called the gender equality paradox. Says, in more gender-equal countries, occupational segregation is actually higher. Women in Norway and Sweden still choose different fields than men despite minimal barriers. Suggests this indicates preferences might play a bigger role than discrimination in career choices. I stammer something about how preferences are socially constructed. He agrees they are, but says that doesn't mean they're the result of current discrimination. Could be cultural factors, evolutionary factors, complex developmental factors. The way he says, evolutionary factors makes me want to scream. Here comes the biological determinism argument. I challenge him on that. Say we can't use biology to justify inequality. He clarifies he's not justifying anything, just explaining that wage gaps might have multiple causes. Says, understanding real causes is necessary for effective policy. My hands are shaking now. I've gone from feeling confident to feeling completely dismantled. Try one. More time. Bring up the World Economic Forum's data on the global gender gap. He's familiar with that too. Talks about how their wage gap calculations have been criticized for methodology. Mentions they don't adequately control for occupations and hours. Says even their own data shows the gap is smallest in economic participation and largest in political representation. Suggests this indicates different types of inequality require different explanations. I'm out of ammunition. Every single point I've raised, he's had a response ready. Not just opinions, but data, studies, statistics. He's clearly spent time researching this extensively. Meanwhile, I've been relying on things I've read in articles, heard in conversations, assumed were true. The confident feeling I had at the start of class has completely evaporated. Now I just feel exposed. Like everyone can see I didn't actually know what I was talking about. Professor finally steps in, says this has been an interesting discussion. Suggests we need to wrap up and move on with the lecture. I'm relieved it's ending, but also humiliated that the professor had to rescue me. The guy in the back just nods, closes his laptop, done with the conversation. He doesn't even look smug or triumphant, which somehow makes it worse. If he were gloating, I could dismiss him as an asshole. But he was calm and factual the entire time, which makes me look like the unreasonable one. Rest of the class proceeds, but I can't focus. My mind is replaying every moment of that debate, thinking of all the things I should have said, better arguments I could have made. But honestly, I don't know if I have better arguments. Everything I thought I knew suddenly feels shaky. The statistics I've been citing for years, are they actually misleading? Have I been oversimplifying a complex issue? No, that can't be right. I know women face discrimination. I've experienced it myself, heard stories from countless women, but something about the way he presented all that data, I couldn't refute it. I didn't have the specific knowledge to counter his specific claims. Class finally ends. I pack up my stuff quickly. Want to get out before anyone tries to talk to me about what just happened. Can feel people looking at me as I leave. Walk quickly down the lecture hall steps, push through the doors, find a bathroom, lock myself in a stall. Just sit there for a few minutes trying to process what happened. I went into that exchange so confident, so sure of my position, came out feeling stupid and uninformed. Worst part is, I can't even say he was wrong exactly. He had sources, data, government statistics. Everything I've been told about the pay gap Is it not true? But that can't be right either. Something is off about his argument. The way he kept separating discrimination from choice, as if they're completely unrelated. Women's choices are constrained by discrimination, by socialization, by structural barriers. But I couldn't articulate that clearly in the moment. I kept getting tangled up in his statistical arguments, feeling angry now, at him for ambushing me like that, at myself for being unprepared. He clearly came to class, ready to have that debate. Probably had all those stats loaded on his laptop, just waiting for someone to bring up the pay gap. What kind of person does that? Who spends their time preparing to debate feminists in economics class? Probably one of those guys who spends all his time online in men's rights forums. But even as I think that, I know it's unfair. He didn't come across as a men's rights activist, didn't use their typical rhetoric. He sounded like someone who genuinely researched the economics, which makes me feel worse because I thought I had researched it too. Apparently, reading articles and blog posts isn't the same as reading actual studies. Sit in that bathroom stall for probably 20 minutes. Miss the start of my next class, but can't bring myself to care. Finally emerge, look at myself in the mirror. My face is still flushed, eyes slightly watery. Pull myself together, wash my face, try to look normal. Head to the library instead of my next class. Need to actually look up these studies he was citing. Find a computer in a quiet corner. Start searching. CONSAD research study on gender pay gap. There it is. Start reading through it. Dense economic analysis. They did find that most of the wage gap disappears when controlling for various factors. But the report also says discrimination is difficult to measure and may still play a role. So he was technically right, but also not telling the whole story. Look up Bureau of Labor Statistics data he mentioned. The stuff about young childless women in urban areas, it's real. There are demographic groups where women slightly out-earn men. Never knew that. Every article I've read focused on the overall gap. Keep digging deeper into academic studies on the pay gap. It's complicated. Much more complicated than I realized. There are studies supporting various positions, methodological debates, different interpretations. The confident 77 cents figure I cited, it's real, but it's also the unadjusted gap. When you control for factors like occupation, hours, experience, it shrinks significantly. But some researchers argue those controls are inappropriate because they adjust away discrimination. Others argue they're necessary for measuring discrimination accurately. There's a legitimate academic debate here that I was completely unaware of. I've been treating this like a settled issue with only one right answer. Meanwhile, economists have been arguing about methodology and interpretation for years. Feel stupid for not knowing this. I'm an economics major, this is literally my field, and I didn't know the actual research. Spend hours going down this rabbit hole. The more I read, the more complicated it gets. There's evidence for discrimination in some contexts. Evidence against it in others. Evidence for occupational choice mattering a lot, but also questions about why those choices differ. By the time I look up, it's getting dark outside. Library is much emptier than when I arrived. My phone has several texts from friends asking where I was. One message asking if I'm okay after what happened in econ class. So people are definitely talking about it. Great. Now I'm the girl who got owned in a debate, and everyone knows. Pack up my stuff, head back to my apartment. Roommate is in the kitchen making dinner, asks where I've been. I mutter something about library, go straight to my room, lie on my bed staring at the ceiling. I can't stop replaying that debate in my mind. The worst part isn't even that I lost the argument. It's that I realize I didn't actually understand the issue as well as I thought. I've been confident, outspoken, ready to challenge professors and classmates. But my confidence was based on incomplete information. I knew the talking points, but not the underlying research. Knew the conclusions, but not how people arrived at them or what debates existed. Feel angry at all the articles and posts that presented this as simple and obvious. The pay gap exists because of discrimination, period. Anyone who says otherwise is sexist. That's what I've been told, what I believed, what I argued. Turns out it's way more complicated. Doesn't mean discrimination doesn't exist, but it's not the simple story I thought. My phone buzzes. It's a group chat with some friends from class. Someone posted a laughing emoji about the epic debate today. Someone else says I shouldn't feel bad. That guy was clearly obsessed with the topic. Another person says he actually had good points, though. The conversation devolves into an argument within the group chat. I mute it, can't deal with this right now. Think about texting my mom, but what would I even say? Called out a professor for glossing over sexism, got demolished by classmate with statistics, feeling dumb. She'd probably be supportive, but I don't want to talk about it. Skip dinner, not hungry anyway. Try to do homework for other classes, but can't concentrate. Keep thinking about how confident I felt this morning. Ready to speak truth to power, challenge the professor, educate my classmates. Now I feel like I don't know anything. Worst part is, I still believe discrimination is real and matters. I've experienced it, other women experience it, it's part of our reality. But apparently the way I understood it, the statistics I relied on, weren't the full picture. How am I supposed to argue for things I believe in if I don't have the evidence right? How am I supposed to trust my own judgment if I was this wrong about something I cared about? Finally fall asleep around midnight, exhausted from stress. Wake up the next morning dreading going to campus. Have that same econ class today. We'll have to see everyone again. And consider skipping, but that would be even more embarrassing. Drag myself to campus, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Get to the lecture hall early. Sit in a different section than usual. Hope to just blend in and not be noticed. Other students file in. Some glance my way. Can't tell if I'm being paranoid or if they're actually looking. The guy from yesterday sits in his usual spot in the back. Doesn't even look in my direction, just sets up his laptop like normal. Professor starts class. Doesn't mention yesterday's debate. Just continues with the next topic in the syllabus. I sit there silently taking notes, not raising my hand once. The confident student ready to challenge the professor is gone. Now, I'm just trying to avoid attention and get through the class. Used to think being outspoken and challenging authority was brave. Now I realize maybe I should make sure I actually know what I'm talking about first. Class ends without incident. I pack up and leave quickly. One of my friends from the class catches up with me in the hallway. Asks if I'm okay. Says, "Yesterday seemed rough." I shrug it off. Say it's fine. Just a debate. She says that guy was being kind of aggressive with all his statistics. I appreciate her trying to make me feel better, but can't really agree. He wasn't aggressive, he was just prepared and I wasn't. That's what actually stings. Spend the rest of the day in this weird fog of self-doubt. Question whether I should keep speaking up in classes. Question whether my other strongly held beliefs are based on incomplete information too. Question whether I've been embarrassing myself this whole time without realizing. Get home that evening, finally check all my messages. There's a post on the university subreddit about the debate. Someone recorded part of it on their phone, apparently. My stomach drops. Please don't let this be going viral. The post has comments debating the pay gap statistics. Most people seem to think the guy was right, but some are defending my position. One comment says, "I seemed passionate but unprepared." That's the nicest way to put it, I guess. Another comment says, "This is why feminists rely on emotion instead of facts." That one makes me furious. I wasn't relying on emotion. I had facts. They just weren't complete facts. And I didn't know the counter evidence. But I know how this looks to everyone watching. Emotional feminist gets destroyed by logical male with statistics. It's like a stereotype come to life, and I'm the punchline. Close Reddit. Don't want to read anymore. Spend the weekend alone, avoiding social plans. Tell friends I have too much homework, but really just don't want to face anyone. Use the time to do what I should have done before. Actually research this topic properly. Read academic papers. Look at raw data. Understand the methodological debates. The more I learn, the more I realize how little I knew, but also how the issue is genuinely complex and contested. There's not one simple truth. There are different ways of measuring and interpreting. By Sunday evening, I feel more informed, but also more uncertain about everything. Used to be so sure of my positions, ready to argue them passionately. Now I see all the caveats and complications and competing interpretations. Maybe that's intellectual growth, but it doesn't feel empowering. It feels like losing the conviction that made me feel strong. Monday comes around, another econ class. I'm dreading it, but force myself to go. Sit in my new usual spot, keep my head down. Professor lectures, I take notes. Class proceeds normally. No dramatic debates. No public humiliation. Just a regular class where I'm now the quiet student in the middle section. Weeks pass. Semester continues. I stop speaking up in that class entirely. The confident voice that was ready to challenge everything is gone. Now I just do the assignments, study for exams, stay silent, see the guy from the debate occasionally. We never speak. He doesn't gloat or acknowledge what happened. Just another student in the class. But I know he fundamentally changed how I see myself, showed me the gap between confidence and knowledge, between passion and preparation, between what I thought I knew and what I actually understood. End of semester approaches. I've done well grade-wise in the class. Turns out, when you actually read the material carefully, instead of just disagreeing with it, you learn things. But I've also lost something. That fire to speak up, to challenge, to fight for what I believe. Now I second-guess everything, wonder if I'm missing important context. I wonder if speaking up will just expose my ignorance again. Last day of class, professor gives closing remarks. Thanks everyone for engagement and participation. Mentions how intellectual debate and different perspectives make for better learning. I think about that debate, whether it made anything better. Maybe the other students learned something. I certainly learned I don't know as much as I thought, but mostly it just made me afraid to speak up. Class ends, semester is over. Walking out of that lecture hall for the last time. Think about the person who walked in on the first day. Confident, ready to challenge sexism wherever I saw it. Certain that I had the moral and factual high ground. Now, I'm just tired and uncertain. Still believe in equality, still think discrimination is real and harmful. But don't trust my own understanding anymore. Don't trust that my passion is backed by sufficient knowledge. That guy with his laptop full of statistics didn't just win a debate. He took away my confidence in my own voice, and I don't know how to get it back.